Hey everybody, welcome to this brand new training series. And if you are a web developer, you know how important a chart or user interface where you can show somebody graphically what their data looks like rather than numbers and series and tables and divs and stuff like that. And as a business person who are running the business, they want to know how our business is doing in terms of charts and so on and so forth. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a really cool way to create charts that you can easily implement into your project. So for example, we're going to start off with this donut chart, which looks like a very simple, and it gives you different metrics across the board that if somebody looks at it like, oh, by the way, this view blue section over here is the biggest one, and see what's going on there and why is this section the smallest one, just so people who are looking at charts, they can visually see your data, and that will help them a lot in terms of how their business is doing. So another one we're going to look at is line graph, and then people who have used PowerPoint and other things in that nature and Excel and so on and so forth, you know how powerful these line charts are. And these are pretty static, but then later on in our video series, we are going to be moving on to Ajax call, where we're going to make a call to our database, get the data from there, and create a dynamic graph. And this is something that I'm going to be teaching you in this video series, and I'm totally stoked about it, and I hope you are too. So without any further ado, let's get right into the training. Before we get started, I just want to have you install one small piece of software. You probably already have installed it if you have watched any of my previous training courses videos, and that is called XAMPP. It is a local host web server. What you will do is it will allow you to have your computer act like a web server. If you don't have that installed, I'm going to leave a link in the resources section where you can just click on it, watch the video, which will guide you to how to install the localhost web server. Let's look at the structure of our folder where I have all these files, and not to worry, you are going to get access to these files in the resources section where it'll be under download. So don't forget to click on that and get all these files. So what I did was, in my localhost htaccess, I have a project, and in a project I have a folder. You can call this folder whatever you want. It's completely up to you. In here I have two PHP files. One is called the index, another one is called Ajax, and then I have one folder called JavaScript, or short form from JS, JavaScript. If I open this up, in here I have 4 files, and we're going to be deep diving into all of these files, what you need and how you can incorporate that. So having said all of that, let's look at the index PHP file first. So I'm going to open this up, and let me minimize this and close all other files. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to act as like this main page. So if you have ever worked on any of the web pages before, then basically what you do is you include, I like to use jQuery and Bootstrap framework, but if you're familiar with the other ones, you can use other framework to make it look prettier, but it's completely up to you. But if you want to follow through with this particular training courses, you can just download the files, like I said, under the download section, where you could just literally copy all these files, put it in a folder, and you can rock and roll. So let's get started. So in here, the very first one, all of this stuff really doesn't matter. And this line of code, basically what it's going to do is it's going to make your graphs responsive. So you could just add this line of code, and this line of code, it just adds the Bootstrap framework from the CDN.js. And then I have a jQuery included. Then I have this, which is the Bootstrap.js file. So nothing really special going on. If you want, you could just literally copy these 3 lines of code. But just so you know, these are not required for you to create your charts or graphs, whatever you want to call it. But these 2 lines of code that you will need in order for you to create the graphs, like for example, these these graphs. So that's that. And then we have the app.js file coming from the JS folder. And then we have the 3 different types of graph files that I have included in here. And then followed by, this is the div that I'm just saying, hey, pad it where it doesn't go, where it leaves a 50 pixel space from the top, and it gets it here. And then followed by this. This is the Bootstrap framework. If you ever used it, you are pretty familiar with it. And if you are not to worry, you don't need to know Bootstrap. You could just follow right through it. And then this is just the text that says, hey, this is easily create charts in seconds. And then we have a couple of buttons, which is this button, simple. Just keep that in mind. Just this class, particular one that says btn underscore chart simple. btn underscore chart 2 data points, and then chart hx, and then everything, all the charts gets displayed in this particular div. And that's all there is to it setting up wise. So next thing, we're finally going to get into creating a simple graph. So I'll see you in that video. Hey there, I just want to take a moment to tell you a course that I have created that's gonna literally take your skill from here to up here in a very short period of time. If you are remotely interested in speeding up learning new things so that way you can move ahead in your business, in your career, in your life, this course is definitely going to help you do that. So without any further ado, if you're remotely interested, just make sure you click the link in the description below, and that's going to take you to a page where you can take this course that's going to help you get to the next level a lot faster. So let's get back to your video where you are learning a valuable information. All right, welcome. Now we finally made it to our simple chart part of this tutorial. So in here, what I'm going to show you is how we can easily create this donut graph. So let's go to our code. So I'm going to close this out and then go to my folder, where all the files are. So first I'm going to open up the app.js file. And by the way, I'm using Sublime Text. This is my favorite editor, but you can choose to use any favorite editor you may have. So I just drag this over, and for example, a simple graph, I'm just gonna drag this over here as well. So what happens is when somebody clicks on it, for example, if I click on this button, simple, if I reload it, nothing loads up. But if I click on this simple button, this donut graph will show up. And in here, what I did was I made it easier for you to include graphs in your projects. I created a function, a JavaScript function that makes life easier for you. So what happens is when someone clicks on this button, and as I said before, I'm using jQuery. So this click event, when someone clicks on this particular button, which is this button, is going to go through here. So I am creating a div container which has one height of 350 pixel, and it has a black border, which is basically this thing right here. That's all this is. And then I created a function in JavaScript called graph, and it takes a few parameters. One of them is being the element where you want your graph to be shown. As I said before in the previous video, all of our graphs are going to be showing in this particular container, which has a class of screen data. So what I'm saying is, hey, go to, like in this line versus chart element, go to screen data and then find graph container. I could just simply say screen data if I wanted to, but that would not include the black dot, a black line border around it. But if you want to include it, you could just simply say screen data and it will dump it there. And the reason why I'm saying a graph container is because I created a container here which I imported into screen data. Hopefully that makes sense. It's very simple, nothing complicated about it. But if you have a div or a container that you want to include it in your chart, that you want to have your chart go into that container, you can simply just include it in a jQuery. Life is good. And the next object in that parameter it takes is it's called chart title, whatever you want to call your graph. So the title will be this portion right here, where it says my simple graph. You can call it XYZ or whatever your project requires, you call it that. And then followed by, you have a couple of different options. You can have a chart type to be a line, a pie, a bar, or a donut. So let's see what it looks like if I change this to a line and save it, just to show you how quickly and easily it just changes. You don't have to do anything. Like, wow, it completely redefines the way the graph looks. It's that simple. So let's look at it, how it looks as a pie. So if I save it, reload the page, click on the simple, so it becomes a pie. So let's look at it as a bar chart as well. And I'm gonna reload it, click on simple, now it becomes bar. As you can see how quickly and easily you can change the look, feel of your graphs that quickly. And then last but not least, let's go back to donut. If you want to make it a donut, you simply just say chart type to be donut. Nothing really. It is that simple. So if I refresh it, it goes back to being a donut. As you can see how beautiful it looks. This looks amazing. If you're doing a presentation, you could just give this to somebody else and be like, oh my God, this looks beautiful. You have done a great job. And how long it literally took you. You just changed this part type to be different ones, whether it be a line, pie, bar, or donut. And it's that simple. And then chart label, this is where you're going to include what labels does your data have. And we will go into it further when we are looking at our Ajax call. But basically what that means is, see these different categories up top where you can say, hey, this part of the graph is Node.js. This part of the graph is JavaScript, so on and so forth. So these are different categories. That's what it means, label. So how many different categories does your graph need to have? And you just include that as an array. And then followed by chart data sets. So in this case, we're only looking at one data set. So it takes it as an array format. So you open as an open bracket and you close it with or close bracket, and within it you create an object which is opened by curly bracket, closed by curly bracket, and then you say label it. What label means in this sense is, so let's say if I say I want it right now in the donut part of it, it's not gonna do anything because it's just one. However, if I change this to, let's say, line graph and reload it, and then this particular label part comes in here, which is the very first color, which is red. It says number of votes. And then if you hover your mouse over it, on the same bullet point, you will see each bullet point has a different color. Like for example, this one is jQuery, which is blue. This is yellow. This is green. This is purple, and then orange. So that's what that is. So basically, if you are using a line graph, you want to include like different metrics. For example, if it's right now, this is just one line. If you had two lines, you could have one for vote, another one for total number of years, which we're going to be looking at soon. So that's what you do here. This is just a label of what the metric stands for. So this fill part, if you're using the line graph, I would recommend that you set it to false. But if you comment that out and not include it, and if I reload the page now, basically what it's going to do is going to fill up this gray part. If you like that kind of look and feel, hey, that's up to you. I personally don't like that look and feel, but if you want it, you can definitely include it in your project. And then next part is the data. How many different values does this thing have? So for example, up top here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it has 6 values in here. separated by a comma, and this is the array, JavaScript array. Just make sure that you are including your values in the same format as your labels are. Otherwise, if you put the 3 in here and then 12 back here, but your labels are messed up, then it's gonna mess up your data set points. So just make sure you do that. And when we look at our Java Ajax call thing, and I will show you how easily you can make sure that your labels and your values coordinate with one another and they don't get messed up. Because if you're just doing it like freeform, it could very easily mess up. So I'm going to show you how to do that when we get to the JavaScript part, or rather Ajax part. And then this is the color part of it, background of it. For example, like the color dot in here if you're doing a line graph. But if you're doing other like pie, donut, or bar, it will have a representation. Like for example, let's just say if I'm doing a bar. And if I save it, refresh it, and then do this, and then this blue color, that is where you could say change this blue to purple, white, yellow, green, whatever you want. You could do that. And then this is the border color, which means it's like all the around it, what it's going to have, like, and then you could put this a hex decimal point or RGB if you know it, and that's that. And you might be wondering, oh, that's really cool, how did you create this? So this particular function is coming straight from your app.js file, and this is the function here. You could look more into it, but if I were you, I would just leave it alone. Just call it like I did. But if you want to look into it, like what it does, so on and so forth, by all means, go for it. So this is how you create a very simple graph, a different bullet point with one metric. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can create 2 different metrics and plot it on your graph, and then followed by Java Ajax call. I'll see you in the next video. Alrighty, let's get started with our following video series. In here, I'm gonna show you how you can easily, with almost no effort, create this beautiful line graph for your web development project. So let's go over to our folder in the JS folder, and in here I'm gonna bring up my Sublime text and then bring in the 2 data point JS file. So just like the previous video, we are going to be going through it, and I have made this extremely simple for you. I mean, it will not get any easier than this. You just have to change a few things and you'll be able to create a beautiful chart in no time. So as I said, we are currently working on this particular file, which I have brought this over. And let me bring it back here. So when you click on this particular button, so if I refresh the screen, click on this, you get these 2 line graphs. So let's go in here, and this is, once again, I am using jQuery. So whenever there is a class, it's called btn chart 2 data points, and we went over it in the previous video. So when someone clicks on this button, this particular line of code will trigger. As you can see, it's only 33 lines of code. Well, you can make it into 32. It's very simple. So let's dive right into it. So just like the previous video in which I explained, we are going to be creating our graph in this container. It's called a screen data. And before creating a graph in there, I have created another div that is called graph container. The only difference between this and the graph container is that it has a black pixel border around it, nothing else. If you don't like it, you could simply just put it in here. This is going to be your element. Otherwise, you could say, I want your chart element, as you probably already remember from the previous video, where we say we're going to set this element to be whatever element that we want. So in this case, we're saying go to the screen data, find this particular div which we just created up here, and then that will be the element where the graph will be created. And then the chart title will be just my two data point graph. You can make this to say whatever you would like or whatever the project requirements are. So in this case, we are just gonna leave the chart type to be line. Obviously, you can change it to other types that I have left it here for you to just to play around it or to see which one fits your project needs. And for your chart labels, we're staying with the same metric, which are 6 metrics, which is PHP, jQuery, CSS, HTML, Node.js, and JavaScript. And for the data sets, the only thing we're going to change is this data set. Because we have 2 lines, we have to make sure that we have 2 data sets object array. So we have a regular array. Within this array, we have object array between the curly brackets, as we have talked about it in the previous video. So in here, like I said, the label part of it, you could say the first metric will be the number of votes. And then my personal preference, I don't like the fill part of it, so I'm going to set this to be false. But if for some reason you like it, you can comment this out or completely delete it. That's completely up to you. And then you have number of values that we want to display. So in this case, for my PHP, for votes, I have the first value to be 12. So if I go here and if I hover my mouse over it, and as you could probably see, the red part is the number of votes. The number of years is like orangey color. So that's something that you can set over here. So I set the number of votes, the background to be, or line to be red, and the number of years, I set the background to be orange and the border color to be this. But if you don't want it, you can simply comment the border color out just to show you what it does. And I'm gonna refresh it. In here, it does absolutely nothing for only line graph. However, for other graphs, like for example, your pie, bar, donut, that may differ, but I will let you play with that and to see whichever one fits your project requirement. But the sake of this training video, we're just gonna keep it very simple. We're gonna say we want 2 lines, and one metric is going to be the number of votes, another metric is going to be the number of years, and then for our data value for the number of votes, these are the 6 values we want to include. However, just for giggles, if I say I want to increase this to be 50 and this to be 30, and I save it, reload it, and I click on this tab, now as you see, this one goes up and this one stays up here. So this is 25. Let's see, why didn't it change? So the JavaScript part is 50. All right, so what had happened was, sometime when you are working with different browser, it caches your JavaScript files if you include it in the page. For example, if I click on the view thing, in this part, if you include it like this rather than inline, it will cache your file and it will not reload it, especially in Chrome. That is a bug. Even though in incognito mode, it still caches it. So to overcome that part, what you can do is you can right click on inspect and then go to network, and you can say disable cache and refresh it. So it will load up the file brand new, like it's coming to the first time. So for example, now if I change this to 50 and reload the page, and this is something that you might face as well. You're probably wondering, I know everything works right, how come it's not showing up? That's the reason why. Because sometimes browsers try to make life easier, but in the long run, they make it difficult. So if I reload the page, click on 2 data points, and now it goes up to 50, and this one goes up to 30, as predicted. So also what I did was, I changed the border color to be red. I uncommented out, and it works like a charm. So there you go. So this is how easily you can create 2-line or 2 metrics of graph in your projects very easily. So simply, if you want to leave everything same as, for example, if your labels doesn't change, you can leave it as is and just include these 2 lines or these 2 JavaScript object, and your life is good. All right. With that said, I will see you in the next video where we will be looking at the AJAX call of it. How do you call your API or your database to extract the data from it? That way you can create dynamic graphs. Ooh, very, very cool stuff coming up. Hope you're ready. Hey there, I just want to take a moment to tell you a course that I've created that's gonna literally take your skill from here to up here in a very short period of time. If you are remotely interested in speeding up learning new things so that way you can move ahead in your business, in your career, in your life, this course is definitely going to help you do that. So without any further ado, if you're remotely interested, just make sure you click the link in the description below, and that's going to take you to a page where you can take this course that's going to help you get to the next level a lot faster. So let's get back to your video where you are learning a valuable information. Okay, last but not least, you have finally made it to the final part of this thing. I hope you have been learning a lot. I hope you practice a lot. And just to make sure you practice a lot, in the next video, I'm gonna share with you the source code in which you can download these files and include them in your project if you like to, the code, or test them out, play around with it, and see what you can do to create some amazing, simple, beautiful graphs. So let's get started with our next section, which is AJAX call. So if I click on this, and now you might be thinking, I just clicked on it, it just automatically appear like, looks like this, like nothing happened. It's so simple. But behind scenes, what it did was it went into the server, in this case it will be local server, and grabbed the data and then brought it back. Then it parsed the data out, and then it plotted it. It did all of those things that quickly. So let me show you how that works. So let's go in here. I'm going to bring in 2 files. One is the AJAX file, which is the last file here, as well as the AJAX PHP file. So what I'm going to do is, just like we have been looking at it so far, where you click the button, let me see, this right here, and then this, when someone clicks on it, this part of code will trigger. And then what I did was, I'm obviously, as you already probably know, that I'm using jQuery, and in jQuery there is this very cool function that is called getJSON, and in here you can tell it which URL, which is the first parameter that you want it to go to. And second parameter, which is your URL query string, you could say this AJAX, which could be a parameter, has a value of AJAX, or could be whatever you want it to identify, and that will authenticate your API call to your server or somebody else's server. And then the next part is the function, which is a callback function. And what I'm doing is I'm just canceling this out, which means it just displays it in the browser. So let me show you what that means. So if I right click on, I'm using Chrome. So if I right click here, click on inspect, and then refresh the page. Let's just start from scratch. And I click on this, and in here, this is what I mean by console log, and then it's going to show you whatever it came back from the server. So that's what's happening. So let's look at it, what happens when we go to the AJAX PHP file. So the very first thing it checked to see is query string AJAX is set. If it is set, then it's going to echo out this particular array, which is this part right here. However, obviously, I'm just showing you this as an example of simple data. In your case, you may have a different requirement for your project. So once you make it to here, you can say, I want to connect to my database. And then based on the query parameters, whatever the case might be, I don't know what your requirements are. So you may have to ask yourself, what are my requirements? If do I want the user to show how many different user groups there are, or how many reports there are for this particular token or class, or whatever the case might be. I will leave that up to you. But to show you, once you authenticate the query string parameter, and let's just say you went into your database and you grab all the records that has users, and you say for this particular date, there is total number of user 10. This particular date, 15, 8, 15, 5, so on and so forth. So that will become your column. This will become your column as well. And this part will become your value within that column. And then once you have that array, you simply echo it out. Simple as that. Great. So that's very simple, but at the same time, very, very powerful. If you understand this and you get it, you can create amazing graphs, like amazing graph. Trust me, once I discovered that, I was like, holy cow, I can create some really serious, amazing graph. All right, so let's go on. So we're back to our Ajax file, the JavaScript file. So we have looked at up until here. And then what I did was I created a variable called Ajax underscore data, which pretty much equals this. And then what I did was I created two empty arrays in JavaScript. One is called values, labels and values. And then I'm using the JavaScript, jQuery, JavaScript, whatever you want to call it. I'll just call it jQuery. There's a each function, which basically what it's going to do is it's gonna take this array and loop through it 6 times, because it has six different values. Because as you see, so it's gonna say, hey, go through here. If it's record equal record date, that's what that means. And then total user, assign a value. So it says, hey, in the labels part of it, I signed, which is the value. And then whatever's under the column record date, I signed it under labels. All right. So whatever's under the value total users, I assign it under value. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to loop 6 times. It's going to say, this is what it is. All right, great. Although if you want, you could do it separately. Say, hey, only assign it once. You could assign it 6 times, but doesn't really matter. It's fine. Clearly it works. And then just like before, I have added this particular div that has 300 pixel height and 1 pixel black border. And then what I'm doing now makes your life a whole lot easier. Rather than us hard coding those values, we have dynamically created them here and say, hey, this is what the values, the labels are. And then just like we hard coded the values before, now we dynamically created an array here, and then we're going to assign this particular variable here, and that's how we create our graph. So let me just leave this out and delete this out as well. I'm just a neat freak like that. I like to keep things a little organized. So that's that. So this particular value is coming from here, which is getting created by this each for loop, if you want to call it that. And then that's that. And then let me go back in here. Come on. And if I refresh it and then click on Ajax call button, and then there you go. Now you know how to create graphs, a simple graph, 2 data point graph, and an Ajax call graph. And by the way, in an Ajax call graph, just like 2 data point, you can literally say another line. Let's just copy it just for giggles. And I'll call this data 2, and I'll call this data 1. Same value. Obviously, you can change these if you like. and I'll call this blue and blue, and I refresh it. It's not gonna look as good because it's gonna be like literally side by side, but I want to show you something really cool that you're gonna be like, wow, this is mind blowing. Okay, here we go. So here it is. So right now you're like, oh wow, nothing really changed, right? So if I zoom in, even at that, because the values are identical, it's not going to show you anything. But here's the cool part. So let me close this out. If I click on any one of these, for example, if I click on the red part of it, user data one, and then what this does is by you clicking on it, it's going to completely remove the a data point for that particular metric. If I click on this, as you can see, it draws a line across it, and then it's going to remove it off the graph. Now, how cool is that? Isn't that amazing? When I discovered that, like, holy cow, this is the best way to create it. So, for example, if you have a department that only cares about their metric, you can just tell them, hey, click on this line, and you only see your points, and that's that. And I'll guarantee you, they're going to be very, very thankful, and they're going to love your work. So having said that, that's how you create Ajax call. All right, congratulations. You finally finished the whole course. I am so proud of you. I just want to say two things. One, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me about anything, any question related to this or any other question you may have. Because you have gotten this course, I'm going to help you out. Number two, in the resource section, you're going to find a link in which you can download the project files for this course. And once again, thank you for taking this course. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in my future courses. Take care. Happy coding.